Seller is responsible, again, to provide the goods, commercial invoice, packaging. Seller takes care of the export licenses. Seller has no obligation to provide for main carriage or for insurance. They're responsible to deliver the goods on board the named vessel. That's huge. We used to say over the ship's rail. You know, the joke was, you know, if the container fell off the off of the crane and it hit the ship, if it fell in the water, it was the seller's responsibility. If it fell on ship, it was the buyer's responsibility. But there's something very important that falls in there. Loaded on board ship or vessel. There's fees and expenses associated with loading a ship and a vessel. As a freight forwarder, when we quote prices, sometimes we aren't sure what all the fees and expenses are. So if you're taking on that responsibility, make sure that your forwarder or your company is familiar with that port. Okay? Especially it'll come up later on the unloading side, but I wanted to bring that up now. As a freight forwarder, we do a lot of business in New York and New Jersey, most ports on the East Coast. Got a pretty good handle on what the expenses are. I can tell you we're starting to do a few shipments now. It's growing that we move freight out of Prince Rupert, out of Canada. Okay, it's a brand new port for us. We're still, so that might not be a responsibility that you want to take because there's shipping costs or loading costs, things that might happen, especially if you get into a strike scenario where your forwarder's telling you there's a possibility that that port might go out on a strike because now there might be additional costs to moving your freight around. Free on board, again, is not a good term to use if your freight is in a container. Okay? Questions? Buyer's responsibilities: pay for the goods, obtain an import license, provide main carriage, the risk of the main carriage, pay all costs for the main carriage, proof of delivery if in the sales contract, inspection. How we doing so far? Is it too cold in here? We okay? Okay. Yeah, I know. That's why I asked. This goes on and off, so. Okay. Anything that we've gone over so far? Okay. CFR, cost and freight. Here's the first term that we see a difference in who pays for the freight and who takes on the responsibility, the risk. The risk ends with loaded on board, and the costs end at the unloading port. So if you're selling, you want to provide the service for your customer. However, you don't want to take on the risk of the ocean. Here's a good term. Let's talk about ocean shipments and your products. Why don't companies like to take on risk at sea? What can happen at sea? Weather.
Ship breaks in half.
Well, first of all, when you talk about weather, you talk about ships breaking in half. I mean, you always have, your freight is always at the captain's discretion. Does everybody know what general average cost is? You kind of nod your head like you've had this experience, have you?
No, I used to work for a broker.
Oh, okay. So you know it. If a captain wants to reduce the weight of the ship, he can always offload freight in the middle of the ocean. It's his discretion. Pardon me? Yep. Why would they do that? That's a good question, Carl. They do that because of bad weather. If the captain feels that the weight of the ship is putting all shipments in peril, he will lighten the weight by throwing containers overboard. And the cost of that freight will be taken on by everybody that's shipping product on that vessel. And that's called general average loss. We've seen it where ships have gotten stuck in canals where they've had to offload freight. There's been damage by doing that. That's all at the captain's discretion.
Is there any kind of priority how he offloads, or he just takes whatever he wants to offload?
Well,
No real answer.
yeah, I really don't know the proper answer. I mean, I could say I'm sure they probably try not to throw hazardous material over. They probably try to take stuff in the section of the ship that they're trying to lighten up. So I'm sure that all plays into, they know the value, so I'm sure they try to throw less valuable, heavy product overboard. Okay? It relates to, I don't know if you've ever been on an airplane